No amount of money can restart a heart that has already stopped, and Randolph Vance, worth somewhere north of $900 million, was learning that particular truth firsthand on the marble floor of his own charity gala. He had laughed 3 minutes earlier. Someone had mentioned calling 911, and he had actually laughed. That detail would haunt Priya Suresh for the rest of her life. Not the color his face turned, not the sound his body made when it hit the floor, but the laugh. The loose, contemptuous sound of a man who had spent 6 decades assuming the world would simply arrange itself around his survival. Priya was carrying a tray of champagne flutes when it happened. She was not supposed to be in the Meridian ballroom that night. She worked the private dining corridor on the 3rd floor of the Ashford Grand. Smaller rooms, quieter guests, better tips per table. But the hotel's regular banquet staff was down 3 people due to a stomach bug tearing through the kitchen, and the event's coordinator had grabbed her by the elbow at 5:15 and told her she had no choice. Priya had swallowed the objection forming in her throat, fastened the last button of her uniform jacket, and walked into the ballroom carrying the practiced, invisible efficiency she had spent 4 years perfecting. She was 28 years old. She had completed 3 years of a cardiology residency at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center before her mother's diagnosis forced her to stop. Pulmonary fibrosis, progressive, expensive, merciless. The kind of illness that didn't kill quickly enough for insurance companies to take seriously, but didn't allow for a normal life either. Priya had calculated the numbers on a legal pad at her mother's kitchen table in October, the year she turned 24, and the math had been simple and terrible. She could finish her residency, or she could keep her mother alive. Not both. She had folded the legal pad in half and called the hospital the next morning. The Ashford Grand paid $16 an hour plus gratuity. On a good weekend with the right guests, she could clear $300 in tips. Her mother's oxygen concentrator rental, the pulmonologist copays, the 2 prescriptions not covered by the catastrophic plan Priya had found online. It added up to something she could almost manage. There was a surgical option, a lung volume reduction procedure at UPMC that the specialist, Dr. Osi, had mentioned in February with the careful optimism of a man who understood that hope was a clinical instrument. Priya had not told her mother about it. The deposit alone was $120,000. She had been setting that figure against her tips for 7 months. Randolph Vance arrived at the Meridian Ballroom at 7:45 with the deliberate lateness of a man who understood that an entrance was a power statement. He was 63, silver-haired, the founder and executive chairman of Vance Capital Partners, a private equity firm that had gutted 17 mid-size American companies in the past decade. He wore a tuxedo that had been fitted that morning and a watch that cost more than Priya's annual salary. His personal physician, Dr. Howard Blaine, trailed him like a shadow, a trim, silver-templed man in his mid-50s who had been on Vance's private payroll for 4 years at $320,000 annually. The gala was for the Hartwell Children's Foundation. $800 a plate. Vance was being honored with the evening's keynote recognition award, a crystal obelisk the size of a small child, for his philanthropic contributions to pediatric healthcare. The irony of what was about to happen would not be lost on anyone in the room. Priya noticed him the way she noticed all the significant guests, quickly, peripherally, cataloguing without staring. She noticed the slight drag in his left foot as he crossed the room. She noticed the way he rolled his neck twice while speaking to a cluster of board members, a small involuntary motion, as if something was tightening. She noticed that he pressed 3 fingers against his sternum while laughing at a joke, a gesture so brief that no one else appeared to register it. She filed it and kept moving. At 8:20, Vance was seated at the head table. The first course had arrived. Priya was refilling water glasses at the adjacent table when she heard the sound, a short, hard exhalation, almost like a cough suppressed at the last second. She turned. Vance had set down his fork. His left hand was flat on the tablecloth. His jaw was clenched. The color had drained from his lower face with the sudden, specific quality of a tide going out. "Vance," said the woman beside him, a foundation trustee named Barbara. "Are you all right?" "Fine," Vance said. His voice came out wrong, thin and airless, stripped of its usual authority. "Just give me a moment." He was not fine. Priya set the water pitcher down on the closest surface. She stood completely still for 2 seconds, watching. The left arm was now pressed hard against his side. His breathing had changed. Shallow, rapid, the chest rising in the wrong rhythm. The jaw was still clenched, but now the muscles around his eyes were tightening too, that particular constellation of facial tension that meant the pain was arriving somewhere the body couldn't contain. She had seen that expression before, in an emergency department, in a cardiac bay, on her mother's face once, before the ambulance came. "Call 911, said someone at the table, a man in a tuxedo with a phone already in his hand. Vance actually laughed, a short, dismissive bark of sound. "Don't be absurd," he managed. "I'm perfectly," and then he wasn't. He lurched sideways, then the charger plate, then Vance himself, sliding out of his chair with a terrible, heavy grace. Dr. Blaine, who had been seated 2 chairs away in conversation with a foundation executive, scrambled up so fast he knocked his own chair backward. "Everyone back," Blaine commanded, dropping to one knee beside Vance. "Give him room, I'm his physician." The ballroom did not go silent. It went loud, then louder. The particular rising noise of 800 people processing something they had not prepared for. Chairs scraped. Someone near the back screamed once. The string quartet stopped mid-phrase. Priya moved to the perimeter of the forming circle. She watched Blaine work. Blaine was already reaching into his jacket for the small emergency kit he carried, a flattened case, she could see, containing what appeared to be a pre-filled syringe. His hands were steady. He looked competent. He looked like a man who had rehearsed this. And that was exactly what bothered her, because Vance on the floor did not look like a man having a cardiac event managed by his personal doctor. He looked like a man having a cardiac event being managed by someone who had already decided what was happening before he looked. His color was wrong for a straightforward heart attack, more ashen than cyanotic, the lips not blue but pale, a particular grayish pallor concentrated at the temples. His breathing was labored but present. His left arm was extended, rigid, not the flaccid drop she expected, and his eyes, she caught his eyes for 1 second as they swept the ceiling, were aware, terrified, but aware. He was conscious. Blaine was loading the syringe with the single-minded focus of a man with a protocol. "What is that?" Priya said. She hadn't planned to speak. The words came out of her the way reflexes do, faster than thought. Blaine didn't look up. "Step back, please. I'm handling this. What medication is in that syringe?" A security officer in a black jacket appeared at her elbow. "Ma'am, you need to." "What is he on daily?" Priya said, louder, stepping forward rather than back. "Mr. Vance, does he take beta blockers? Calcium channel blockers? Any anticoagulants?" Vance's eyes found her. Something in them sharpened, the involuntary animal attention of a person in extremis registering an unfamiliar voice asking specific questions. "Who are you?" Blaine said, finally looking up at her. He took in the uniform jacket, the room, the tray she had abandoned 6 feet away. Something passed across his face, a flicker of dismissal so practiced it had become reflex. "This is not your concern. Step back. He's presenting with ST elevation symptoms in a conscious patient," Priya said. "If that's epinephrine and he's already on a beta blocker, you're about to send his heart into a hypertensive crisis. What is in the syringe?" The security officer grabbed her arm. Vance made a sound. Not words, but deliberate, a guttural, effortful sound that made everyone stop. His right hand moved. Slowly, painfully, he pointed at Priya. "Let go of her," said Donovan Shaw, Vance's head of personal security, who had appeared from somewhere behind the crowd. His voice was quiet and absolute. The security officer released Priya's arm. Blaine stared. "Mr. Vance, I strongly—" "What?" Vance said, extracted like something precious. "Are you giving me?" Blaine's mouth opened, closed. He looked at the syringe. "It's adrenaline. Standard protocol for no," Priya said. "Does anyone have aspirin?" "Regular aspirin, 325 milligrams." She was already moving, pulling her phone out of her apron pocket and pressing it into the security officer's hands. "Stay with 911. Speaker, don't hang up." A woman in a beaded dress was holding out a small tin pill case. Priya crossed to her in 4 steps, took it, snapped it open. Regular aspirin. She almost exhaled with relief. She went back bland entirely now, ignoring the crowd, ignoring everything except the man on the floor and the specific concentrated work in front of her. "Mr. Vance, I need you to chew this, not swallow." "Chew." She placed the tablet between his lips. "Can you do that?" He looked at her. His jaw worked. "My name is Priya. I'm going to stay right here. Can you tell me, do you take a blood pressure medication daily?" He managed a single nod. "Calcium channel blocker," another nod, slower. "Beta blocker as well?" A pause. Then, the smallest possible shake of his head. "Okay." She put 2 fingers to his wrist, found the pulse. Rapid, uneven, a thready quality she didn't like but had felt before and knew she could work with. "Okay, you're conscious. Your airway is open. The aspirin is going to help. I need you to breathe slowly with me. Can you watch my hand?" She held her palm in his eyeline and breathed visibly, slowly, exaggerating the rise and fall of her own chest. Vance watched her hand. After a moment, something in his breathing shifted. Not normal, not good, but slightly, fractionally more controlled. Behind her, Blaine said something she didn't register. Donovan Shaw said something in response that she didn't register either. The 911's Bischa's voice came thinly through the phone, asking for the address. Someone answered them. The paramedics arrived in 11 minutes. When they came through the ballroom's side entrance with the gurney, the lead paramedic, with a close-cut natural and the quick eyes of someone who read rooms for a living, looked at the scene. Priya kneeling beside Vance, his color marginally improved, his breathing present and semi-regular, and said simply, "What do we have?" Priya gave her a clean 30-second summary. Presentation, timeline, medication confirmed, aspirin administered, pulse rate and character, current breathing pattern. The paramedic nodded twice and began her own assessment without interrupting. Blaine tried to interject. The paramedic looked at him once and turned back to Priya. They loaded Vance onto the gurney. He was looking at Priya as they wheeled him toward the door. She stood and watched him go, and for a single strange moment, in the middle of that destroyed ballroom, with the champagne still cold in the flutes, and the string quartet sitting in silence, and 800 people not moving, their eyes connected, and something passed between them that had no name and needed none. Then he was gone, and the doors swung shut behind him, and Priya stood alone in the center of the floor and realized her hands were shaking. The events coordinator fired her the next morning. She was called into the back office at 9:15, before the hotel's breakfast service had finished. The coordinator, A man named Marcus sat behind a desk that was too large for the room and read from a piece of paper in a way that suggested he had written it down specifically to avoid looking at her. Unauthorized medical intervention, the paper said. Physical contact with a VIP guest in violation of Ashford Grand Protocol. Disruption of a charitable event causing reputational risk to the hotel's hospitality brand. He was dying, Priya said. Marcus looked at a point slightly above her head. The hotel's legal team has been in contact with Mr. Vance's office this morning. A settlement offer is being extended to you, which we believe reflects the circumstances generously, given your financial situation. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a cashier's check, $40,000. There was a non-disclosure agreement attached, 12 pages, dense, binding. It prevented her from discussing Randolph Vance, his medical event, his physician, or her own role in the evening. From speaking to press, to social media, to anyone who might amplify the account, $40,000 in exchange for permanent silence. Priya looked at the check. She thought about the oxygen concentrator, the copays, the 7 months of tips she had been accumulating in a separate savings account that currently held $11,000. She thought about Dr. Osi saying the words, lung volume reduction, and watching her face while he said them, with the careful hope of someone who knew the math as well as she did. $40,000 was not $120,000. She closed the folder and pushed it back across the desk. Marcus blinked. Mrs. Suresh. He made a promise, she said. She had not planned to say this. She hadn't known she was going to say it until the words were already in the air, but she had heard it, in the ballroom, after Vance had pointed at her. In the 3 seconds before the security guard released her arm, Vance had said something, 2 words rasped in the ruined voice of a man running out of time. Pay her, 2 words. 800 people in the room, and she alone had been close enough to hear them. I won't sign, she said, and she walked out. 48 hours later, the story appeared on the internet before Priya fully understood how. A clip, 19 seconds, shot from near the ballroom's east entrance on someone's phone, angled poorly but unmistakably clear. Vance on the floor, Priya kneeling beside him, her voice audible. What is in that syringe? The security officer grabbing her arm, Vance pointing. The caption was simply, the waitress asked the question his own doctor didn't. By noon it had 4 million views. By midnight, Vance Capital's stock had dropped 9% on the opening of Asian markets. 3 board members issued statements. 2 journalists called the hotel. Donovan Shaw released a brief comment confirming Vance had been hospitalized and was stable, which confirmed what everyone already suspected and inflamed the speculation further. The deeper story surfaced 36 hours after that in a piece published by a financial reporter who had been investigating Vance entirely and recognized an opportunity. Dr. Howard Blaine, the piece reported, was not just Vance's personal physician. He was also a minor equity partner, documented, in a health tech company that Vance Capital was positioned to acquire. The acquisition's valuation depended, significantly, on Vance remaining active as executive chairman. A Vance who was publicly incapacitated, who required a formal medical leave, who visibly lost control at a charity dinner, was a Vance whose continued leadership was suddenly in question, which was incidentally terrible for the acquisition price. The piece did not directly accuse Blaine of anything. It did not need to. What it described, in careful clinical terms cross-referenced with 2 cardiologists who agreed to speak on background, was a treatment protocol that had been, at best, aggressively conservative in managing Vance's chronic cardiac symptoms in a way that kept them symptomatic but not critical, manageable by the physician present. bezin by the physician present, dependent on the specific oversight of the physician present, the kind of protocol, the sources suggested, that served the physician's continued relevance as much as the patient's health. Priya read the piece on her phone in her mother's apartment in Squirrel Hill. Her mother was asleep in the next room. The oxygen concentrator hummed its constant, patient hum. Outside, a November rain was tapping on the window with the particular persistence of something that did not intend to stop. She read the piece twice. Then she sat with her phone on her knee and thought about the 14-hour days and the legal pad and the number 120,000 and the way Dr. Osi had said there is a real chance of meaningful improvement with the careful precision of a man who believed what he was saying and knew that hope was not the same as guarantee. Her phone rang at 7 the next morning. An unknown number with a Pittsburgh area code. It was Donovan Shaw. Vance wanted to see her. The offices of Vance Capital Partners occupied the 41st and 42nd floors of a building in the cultural district that Priya had walked past 800 times on her way to other places. The lobby was exactly what she expected. Marble, tall ceilings, the specific silence of rooms where money had been made for a long time. Shaw met her at the elevator and rode up with her without speaking. Vance was behind a desk that looked north toward the river. He looked diminished in the way that hospital discharges always made people look reduced, slightly softer around the edges, as if the event had taken some physical quantity of him that had not yet returned. He was wearing a dress shirt without a tie. When Priya entered, he stood, slowly, and with the careful attention to his body of a man who had recently been reminded that it could fail him. "Sit down," he said, which was not quite a greeting, but not quite wasn't. Two people were already in the room. A woman named Ruth, who was Vance's general counsel. Compact, direct, a woman who wore her intelligence as plainly as her shoes, and a man Priya recognized from the gala, though she hadn't known his name until Shaw said it in the elevator, Philip Heston, Vance's chief of staff. Priya sat. Vance looked at her for a long moment. He had the look of a man recalibrating, not because he had decided to trust her, but because he had already decided and was catching up to himself. "You didn't take the money," he said. "No. Duh. The offer was generous, given the legal exposure you created by interfering with a licensed physician's care." Priya looked at him evenly. The licensed physician was about to administer epinephrine to a patient presenting with suspected STEMI, who had confirmed calcium channel blocker use. Epinephrine in that context causes severe coronary vasospasm. If he had injected it, you would have arrested on that ballroom floor. Your chances of surviving a cardiac arrest with 11-minute paramedic response time in your age bracket and with your existing cardiac history are not favorable. Silence. Ruth, the attorney, was writing something. "How did you know my cardiac history?" Vance asked. "I didn't. I inferred it from your presentation and your medication confirmation." "I would have adjusted if I'd been wrong." She paused. "I wasn't wrong." Something moved across Vance's face. Not quite a smile, more like the expression of a man encountering something he had not encountered in a while. "Who are you?" he said. It was the same question Blaine had asked in the ballroom, but from Vance's mouth it meant something entirely different. Priya told him. The residency, the program, rank. She had been second in her cohort at Pitt. The October she had sat at her mother's kitchen table with the legal pad, the oxygen concentrator, the pulmonologist, the number 120,000. Vance listened without moving. When she finished, the room was quiet for a moment. The river was visible through the windows, grey and quick under the November sky. "You could have sued," Vance said. "The clip was viral before I was discharged. Every plaintiff's attorney in the city would have taken your case." "I don't want a lawsuit," Priya said. "I want what you said, What did I say? Pay her. In the ballroom before they loaded you onto the gurney. 2 words she met his eyes. I need $120,000. I need it in time to book the surgical suite at UPMC before the January intake closes. After that, I'll sign whatever your legal team wants. Ruth looked up from her notepad. Heston was very still. Vance said nothing for what felt like a long time. He looked at his hands on the desk, then at Priya, then at some middle distance that appeared to contain something visible only to him. Blaine is being referred to the State Medical Board, he said finally. Ruth is handling it. I know, Priya said. She had read the statement. The acquisition he had a stake in has been suspended pending independent review. I read that too. Vance nodded slowly. He appeared to be assembling something in his own mind, checking it, finding it intact. My cardiac care is currently unmanaged, he said. I've been without a physician for 4 days. He glanced at Ruth. We discussed a consulting's position. Ruth slipped a folder across the desk to Priya. Inside was a contract, not the non-disclosure she had walked away from, but something different, a 1-year consulting engagement, a retainer figure. A healthcare coordination role in the description that any first-year associate could see was essentially a formal acknowledgement of a debt. The retainer was $150,000, paid in advance, first year guaranteed. Priya looked at the figure. She looked at Vance. She thought about the legal pad. She thought about the concentrated hum of the machine in the next room of her mother's apartment, patient and constant as a small engine of hope. You screamed at someone to pay me, she said, in a ballroom in front of 800 people. While you were dying, I was not screaming, Vance said. I was emphatic. There's a distinction. Priya looked at him for a moment. Then, for the first time since she had walked into the room, something in her face changed. Some carefully constructed wall she had been maintaining, not from cold professionalism, but from the simple discipline of a person's who had learned that hope was a thing to be protected, to be held close, and not displayed until it was safe. The wall came down, just slightly, just enough. Okay, she said. She picked up the pen Ruth extended. Okay. 14 weeks later, Priya's mother, Kamala, walked out of UPMC with improved lung function and a follow-up schedule, and the particular bewildered quality of a woman who had been handed time she had stopped expecting to have. Priya was beside her, holding her arm in the weak February light. Kamala said something in Tamil, a phrase she used in moments that were too full for English, and Priya squeezed her arm and didn't try to answer. She had given notice at the Ashford Grand 2 months earlier. She had re-enrolled at the University of Pittsburgh. Her residency program had taken her back, not as a formality, but because her cohort director had looked at what she'd done in that ballroom and said, without embellishment, that the program would be lucky to have her finish. Randolph Vance attended the re-enrollment ceremony as a private donor. He sat in the back, did not make a speech, and left before the reception. Priya spotted him leaving and did not stop him, because she understood that for certain people, bearing witness was the most honest form of acknowledgement available. She sent him a text that evening. 3 words, Leo's doing well. He had never learned her brother's name. His name was not Leo. His name was her mother's name, Kamala. Her mother was walking, who had been handed time. She sent it anyway. Sometimes the truth and the precise facts live in 2 different places, and the truth is the one that matters. Vance replied after a moment, 2 words, as before, symmetrical, as if he had learned something from the first time. Good. Continue. She intended to.